All right, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have returning guest, very special guest, Hans Utter. Last name is spelled Utter. And this will be our sixth episode in the series of MKULTRA for the masses. Music is the weapon. So they're been very well received. I have a lot of listeners and a lot of people who followed these. And you can see the visuals now on YouTube channel if you'd like to. You can check that out. And he's kind of preoccupied, but if you have a chance, you can. I am now a person who sells liquid IV. So I've used liquid IV. It's a hydration multiplier. It's a brand, and I really like their product. I actually use it almost every day. I have their energy version, and you can get 20% off and free shipping for liquid IV fueling life's adventures if you use William Ramsey Investigates, or WRI. You just use the acronym WRI, type that into the website, which I will include in the show notes for liquid IV. But one of the best things about liquid IV is it hydrates. You can carry it in a pack, and they also have different brands. They have an energy brand. They've sold over 40 million. They've donated over $40 million to organizations around the world. And they have 12 different flavors. They've got vitamins, 3 times the electrolytes of other sports drinks. And it's non-GMO. And it doesn't have a lot of sugar, which is nice. It's not too sweet. It tastes good. So that's liquid IV. And it's good for hot temperatures if you've had like a pretty heavy drinking weekend or dancing or things like that. You always want to stay properly hydrated. So I actually really do believe in this product, and I'm happy to promote it. And actually use their energy drink as well, which is really nice. It doesn't have jitters or anything like that. It gives you kind of a clean, kind of green tea type of energy. So I definitely support this product, Liquid IV, fueling life's adventures. Check out. I'll put a link to the websites in the show notes. But again, it's Hans Utter. This will be episode 6, and we kind of finished off the last one last month talking about incredible numerology associated with a lot of these events in 1960s, Altamont and Crowley summoning, and just weird things that happened in the 60s. But Hans Utter, welcome back to the show.
Yeah. And I just want to say one thing about Crowley. And by the way, my website is under construction, so I've got a lot of this material I'm going to start putting together in book form. I have had some academic writing that I finished up, but I'm going to just go ahead into the truth realm without fear for losing my credentialed status in certain sectors. But people are aware of this. Even the Grateful Dead, which we'll get into, is sort of it gets an iconic status, right? Kind of, it's promoted. Crowley, the same thing, because with Crowley, in a certain way, he was pretty obscure. I mean, he did not have many success stories in any of his practices, and most of his adepts, it's not like they, Kenneth Anger, who was like, came in at, as his successor or whatever. But I mean, Crowley was promoted in the media, promoted by all these rock bands, promoted by the Beatles, promoted. So he was kind of brought out of, he died a hopeless junkie, right? I mean, he destroyed many people's lives, and seems like he destroyed his own lives. And like half of his summonings, he could never close the porthole again. It's like, and then like Jimmy Page, let's move into this house, with
Boleskine Manor, yeah, Boleskine.
Yeah, let's move into this house, near Loch Ness that still has this active, very powerful demonic presence that was never put back. Why would you want to do that? I mean, maybe in a country called retard land that would make sense, but at least for me personally, unless you think you could control some of these entities, right? But Crowley was, in a certain way, they could have also chosen someone else, but he also had that intelligence agency connection, right? So going back to John Dee, and so you can't really, you can separate them out, but they come together, right, in various ways. as we'll look in further with a lot of these esoteric research projects conducted at the Stanford Research Institute, which is right where the Grateful Dead was born. And that's where, Ken Kesey and Robert Hunter were part of these 1959 tests. And everything kind of came out of, Palo Alto. It was all out of that place, but they're doing experiments and, mind reading, psychic stuff. You got Uri Geller. There's all kinds of occult stuff. The Circle of Nine tied with him. You've got dream telepathy, remote viewing, but remote viewing had many, many aspects. So it wasn't only the drug research, but it was parapsychology and occultism for sure that took place at the SRI.
And it's a stone's throw from where Kesey worked at the Veterans Hospital. It's literally right down the same street. That street ends up at SRI, which is really, for people who don't know, it's not like a building. It's almost like a little small liberal arts campus. It's like a small college. It's huge. It's decently sized. It's very well funded.
Yeah, so it's just really an interesting story, and I've got about 40 pages of handwritten notes of other stuff. I'm not even going to look at that. We'll just go through what I have because there's so many other. I look at it, it's like an investigation, like your show title. So you just keep bringing up all of these connections and just the whole development in concert with many, many other things, right? So you can't really, the 1960s would not have happened if it wasn't for the Beatles. Really, the 60s rock, because rock was dead, right? The Beatles brought rock back. It was kind of the era after all the first generation rock and rollers died or, were in jail or, whatever, or serving in the military. It had like very, easy listening, super cheesy. And they had all these like, teen novelty records, so it wasn't, also had doo-wop and stuff, but it suddenly rock, but that's tied with the JFK assassination, as I have here. And then LSD and Crowley are also tied directly with the Beatles as well. But we're not, we're focusing mostly on the West Coast. So let's go ahead and dive in. Next slide.
Let's do it. Jerry Garcia, Swain's Music. Swain's Music is where he used to play when he was 18. Yeah, crazy. On University Avenue in Palo Alto.
Yeah. So Jerry, and the thing was, see, there's a common practice, right, called sheep dipping, or like if someone is in military, they're going to go into intel. They usually have this sort of egregious, dishonorable discharge, right? So Jerry had top secret security clearance to work in missile silos, and so, and it's possible, basically him just being a screw off and doing stupid things, he actually did that, but doesn't mean he still could have been recruited. Like, this guy's a wild card, well, let's recruit him. But you don't go from top secret clearance to suddenly, why of all places in the country to move is Palo Alto. He chose there, and immediately, and just an interesting factoid is that so the Warlocks, why they had to change their name?
No.
There was another band called the Warlocks in New York City. You know what that band's name changed to?
No.
The Velvet Underground.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. Velvet Underground. Very, very important group, right? Culturally. I mean, that whole scene with Warhol and everything else associated. So, yeah. And then, of course, Jerry's story about, I opened up the Oxford English Dictionary and I saw the Grateful Dead on one page, right? So people have researched every single dictionary available at that time. There was no dictionary that had the Grateful Dead in full, But anyway, so let's just go on. We'll leave Jerry there. So this is an interesting story. 60s rock star on FBI payroll. So this is talking about Jerry Garcia working. Jerome Garcia, guitarist and lead singer for the Grateful Dead, a rock band with a large and loyal following among the hippie and drug counterculture of the 1960s and 70s, was employed by the FBI from 1968 to 1975 as part of the federal agency's COINTELPRO program. COINTELPRO was designed to infiltrate and gather intelligence on violent and revolutionary groups inside the United States. So this is from the New York Times, right? So, and this is an article saying that, and this is the church commissions, right? So this is saying that they worked for, and we can go through all this whole article. It's a bit hard to read, but it's, you can see it there if you want to chime in on that bit.
No, it's incredible. Like, you would never think that guy was a COINTELPRO asset. Counterintelligence program. That's what it's short for, right? That's incredible.
Yeah. And so like the
yeah,
documents.
Yeah. Do you want to read it? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. If you can read that, the documents were a subject of you read about that, that's the second paragraph.
The documents, which were the subject of a 5-year lawsuit by a group of Grateful Dead fans called Deadheads for Freedom of Information in the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, were withheld by the FBI as classified material for reasons of national security. Federal judge ordered the documents released in July of 1990, and they were finally declassified and made public in October of this year. It is unknown how much money was involved or whether Mr. Garcia remains employed by the FBI, since large portions of many documents were deleted, and the release of others is still an issue of legal contention. FBI spokesman Dick Held said that the COINTELPRO program was discontinued in 1975 and that Mr. Garcia no longer works for the agency, as his situation was unique to the 60s. Wow. One of the original plaintiffs in the 1985 lawsuit was Brent Midland, the keyboardist of the Grateful Dead, who died of a drug overdose in August of 1990. According to Nancy Morehouse of Deadheads for Freedom for Information, the lawsuit was prompted by rumors of the band's fan mailing list being sent to the DEA for surveillance of drug dealers and users, and fan mail being opened and forwarded to the FBI. Wow.
And we'll see about Operation Deadhead, which is also, there literally was an Operation Deadhead, and this goes into the 80s and 90s. People were accusing Jerry of being an informant. But go ahead, continue reading.
Yeah, who would know? Like, I'm going to follow this Deadhead band. They're sending all their fan information to the freaking government. Like, that is incredible.
And they have the Operation Deadhead. It's not even like, it's not even like one step away, right? There's
right. Oh, no, it's incredible. Grateful Dead concerts are notorious for illegal drug use among fans, specifically hallucinogenics such as LSD, psilocybin, mushrooms, and MDA. Morehouse said that, first, I couldn't believe that Jerry would be involved in something like this. I mean, it's not like he needs the money. At $30 per ticket, he makes millions off his concerts every year. And as a Deadhead, I thought that the band really believed in the peace and love that they sing about on stage. Now I feel angry and betrayed. Grateful Dead fans interviewed in recent concert in Eugene, Oregon, expressed similar feelings of disbelief, shock, and anger. Morehouse said that the Mr. Midland was the only one of the band who really seemed interested in finding out about if these rumors were true, and speculated that Mr. Garcia's rumored involvement with heroin may have landed him in trouble with the federal law enforcement agencies, who then pressured him to work as part of COINTELPRO to avoid prosecution. Mr. Held said that he was not at liberty to discuss the FBI's recruitment policies or to speculate upon Mr. Garcia's drug use. Mr. Garcia was unavailable for comment, but a band spokesperson asked about the released documents and said, "No way, man. Like, that's a lie."
Yeah, that's a great legal defense. But this is only, to me, that's the tip of the iceberg, but it shows there is an iceberg, right? Agreed. So there's many other aspects of this.
Other bands today are giving their fan mailing lists or information to the feds? That's actually a shocker.
Well, and I want to, this I'll say, because I have not followed this up. I'm sort of going back into the research, fearless research without any, what the heck, who cares, right? They're all gonna, we're all good now because we've woken up in America, hopefully. But anyways, part of this is that, I have gotten some pushback in the past, which I didn't mean to, because I don't consider myself controversial in particular. I just relate facts. But I had several people, I've had people contact me and different things. And one of the things is about the Grateful Dead being involved in human trafficking and sex slavery, and lyrics within songs referring directly to this. I don't have, that's an allegation that I wouldn't make that allocation, right? But that's, there's other layers of this, who knows? But some people have said this is a fake story. It looks pretty legitimate to me, and there's enough there that you can confirm, right, that this is not, it makes a lot of sense, especially when we see the Operation Deadhead, that was going on, and that continued after 1975, and it's like, and there was another lawsuit against Jerry from fans because of Operation Deadhead.
Interesting.
Life in prison, man. There were people getting life in prisons. So depending, but let's we can move on from there.
Long Strange Trip Inside the History of the Grateful Dead by Dennis McNally.
Okay, so one of the consequences of American Beauty was the return of Alan Trist, Garcia and Hunter's buddy from Palo Alto. So Alan Trist is very important, right? When he left California, he'd attended Cambridge, eventually marrying Robert Hunter's friend from the same Palo Alto circle, Christy Bourne. Throughout the 60s, Christy maintained a close friendship with both men, which kept the connection alive. After the Hollywood Festival show in 1970, Alan had gotten together with Hunter and McIntyre, and eventually John had offered him the job of running Ice Nine, the Dead's music publishing firm. And by the way, that's a William S. Burroughs reference, right? Ice Nine. So Alan faced an interesting quandary. He was then working with the Tavistock Institute, which studied social change and now had the opportunity to live it. So right now we have a tie directly from the initial Stanford LSD experiments to Jerry Garcia, Robert Hunter, the Grateful Dead, and the Tavistock Institute. And I'll say this, like some of the stuff I pulled up before, there's a lot of stuff that is now removed from internet, right? Even I've seen references, Wikipedia and certain articles, disappear. But anyway, so Alan Trist, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to pull up his picture right here. There's Trist, and then it helped establish Ice Nine Publishing Company, 1970. He was a editor in Eugene, Oregon.
But here's the thing: you have these whitewashed bios, right? And that's what I noticed quite a bit. So that's why this quote is important, because the fact that he was working for Tavistock Institute, he attended Cambridge, right? He wasn't just. You look at that image, you think he's just, a guy, smoking a lot of weed and making psychedelic pictures in his bedroom, right? But right. The guy went to Cambridge and worked for the Tavistock Institute, and they don't let anybody off the street to work at the Tavistock Institute, right?
No way. Incredible. Yeah, it's amazing. Is he still around?
I don't. He may well be. I don't know. Some of these guys are, disappearing. But what's interesting is that they're you see across the board, right? Many of these very pivotal figures also have a professional life, usually connected with some kind of institutional research, even military, even intelligence, or even some type of Tavistock, these, or Esalen or whatever. But right. that is bifurcated, right? So you get a totally bifurcated bio. And some of these cases, and Alan Trist is one of them, where I couldn't find his full bio. It's kind of that scrub clean, he's just a hippie dude, just likes to party, peace and love, whatever. But you can play some of this, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it is weird. Like,
you'll play some of this. This would be good to see some of these images, actually.
Jerry, acid test.
Can you play the sound? I'm not getting any sound.
Yeah, hold on. Let me start over again.
I think your audio is muted on the video. Audio is muted on the video.
Had a life of its own, and I was just a part.
This is from Long Strange Trip.
There was a conscious decision in my life to be involved in something that was flowing and dynamic and living. Something that had a life of its own, and I was just a part of it.
This is the Holy Grail. This has never been seen. I don't know why.
What is it about the Grateful Dead?
Grateful Dead.
The narrative of the Grateful Dead was that
We're the same as you. You're the same as us. There is no real distinction. The camaraderie and the fellowship in that is so powerful.
Yeah, let's have some fun.
We were experimenting with psychedelics as much as we were playing music.
It's a philosophy of leaving yourself open to possibility and leaving yourself open to magic.
The acid test experience really formed the band as a group mind.
As a group mind.
30 minutes, I could find any drug that I want. Uh-oh. Are we being pulled?
Sound. That's the link between them and the audience.
We built the wall of sound with our own two hands. It was like the voice of God.
If you were in the audience, you were included in the experience.
You should have known something was coming when there were more people outside the show than there were inside.
There was a strong belief that it'd be leaderless.
Who was in charge?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that. There were times when I was in charge, times when Jerry was in charge. Your truck that had a blown carburetor. That carburetor was the boss.
It was total chaos.
Spinners would be out in the hall, and they'd be bowing, so they thought Garcia was a problem.
Jerry Garcia did not bargain to be the mayor of a traveling countercultural town.
It was a machine by then. You know how many people are depending on this show going down the road? Where's the freedom in that?
It's not up to us to define the Grateful Dead. It's this living, breathing thing. And that's one of the parts of its magic. Not defining it is that it becomes everything.
Okay, well, yeah, but so
That
that's
was executive produced by Scorsese. Interesting.
yeah. So again, so there's a mythology that this is getting us. These things have long lifetimes. Yeah, we'll go back to the slides here, and
Okay, well, let me get my AirPods to work. I can't figure this out. Yeah, let's go back to the slides. Let's see. There you go.
okay. So again, we have Tavistock Institute. Working with the Tavistock Institute, had the opportunity to live social change, or perhaps to direct it, right? So what's more interesting than you're coming up with these theories of social change? Well, let's try to actually implement them, right? So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll start playing some clips in their own words. You can go ahead and read it if you like.
It says, what united the original Provincetown Bohemians, playwrights, and painters both was the idea that art was the great universal refreshment. Curiously, for such dissimilar folk, this is what united the founders of the Grateful Dead. What we were interested in was art, recalls Alan Trist, who was 19 when he was his father, Eric Trist, a visiting fellow at Stanford, who founded the Tavistock Institute in London, arrived in Palo Alto in 1960.
His father founded Tavistock, man. That's not just like some dude, living in their parents' basement, smoking weed and painting, right? That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, let's go back. It was the business of being an artist that totally captured Jerry and Hunter, he states, pointing out to me when we meet at the bagel shop near the Dead's office in San Rafael.
Well, so these guys all met up at the same time, or 59. 60 Jerry's showing up there in Palo Alto, right? They're all kind of arriving. And in fact, the Ken Babbs and Ken Kesey, right? They were both Wilson Fellows, and they were both in the military. So they were both on the Wilson Fellowship. They met as Wilson Fellows in the mid 50s, right? And Ken Babbs, many people say, was the central person that was really running a lot of the high tech stuff of the Merry Pranksters, right? Because they had these crazy, we played some of their recordings. I mean, from the acid test. I mean, they'd have 100 different speakers in different places with weird lights, and I mean, it was intense. But let's I want to start playing some of the actual recordings of these guys in the Dead revealing or talking about stuff
Okay.
as we go deeper. So, everyone knows about Owsley Stanley the Third. Or do you want to say something about him, or we can just play the clip?
I thought Owsley Stanley was the LSD guy, right? Isn't he the one of the proponents of bringing a lot of LSD in there?
Well, okay, so Owsley Stanley was the sound guy for the Grateful Dead. He was in the Air Force, doing advanced radio telemetry, advanced technology, especially with signal frequency transfer stuff. But he became one of the most notorious LSD chemists, as well as creating the Grateful Dead's entire sound system. So this crazy wall of sound stuff, he designed that. He was building that, as well as distributing LSD and becoming one of the largest manufacturers of LSD. But so let's listen to LSD talking about the occult background of the Grateful Dead and how they're using LSD. So this is Owsley Stanley speaking. I think it's in the mid-70s. So here we are. Here's the recording. I'm going to play this.
Well, if you can't describe what you were doing with acid before, can you describe what was different about what the Kesey outfit was doing with it?
Well, it was magic. It took you into a place that was like the descriptions in the books by the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, and it made sense of all the different occult things that I'd read. It was.
Just notice his references, occult things. He said Rosicrucians and Freemasons, right? So, and just real quick, Owsley Stanley is from a very, very wealthy. Owsley Stanley III is from a very wealthy elite Kentucky family, and was also
grandfather was in the Senate.
Yep. So he's also just like Alan Trist, whose dad happened to found the Tavistock Institute. He wasn't just, making coffee, and Trist was very central. Okay, here we go. Let's keep listening to this. Oops, sorry.
It was a pathway to another place, and it seemed to give you access to mental powers that were written about and talked about, both amongst the Hindus and amongst the ancient alchemists and magicians, and seemed to go direct, give you the access to those things. It was like a tool to work on the consciousness. Although the material always gave me great visions, incredible visions. I'm sure that it's the root source of the art that I do, even today. I'm sure it was the root source of my ability to manipulate sound, which I looked at as an art form. I never looked at myself as an engineer anymore, and I looked at myself as a chemist or anything else. Not a scientist. I have a scientific background, but because I'm interested in everything. And science is just a way of describing the physical universe. And alchemy and the occult is just a way of describing the non-physical universe. And I was interested in both aspects. Art is a way of creating something yourself as a man, which can say something about either the physical, the non-physical, or both.
Yeah. I was going to say that somewhere along the line there's a bridge between the two, where comparing and contrasting those things.
Well, I like spatiality. One of the earliest things that happened to me with regards to psychedelics was that
Okay, so right here, so he is referring to, as we go further into this, he talks about experiments, creating group minds, creating telekinesis, creating all these things. Just at the time, the Stanford Research Institute was conducting multiple programs in these areas, right? Including, though, he says, doorway between this world and the next. He uses specific terms. He doesn't say spirituality. He says occult and alchemy. Okay. Right. And he says opening the barriers between worlds, right? So that's Owsley. I'll just play. Did you want to just say anything about that?
It's fascinating. I've never heard that. That's really interesting information, that they had all of that terminology down, that they're putting it on there, you can see that kind of alternate occult outlook, I think, is pretty telling.
Well, yeah, and it's very specific, right? He's very specific, right? And this guy, again, was, advanced chemist, and actually the weird thing is another like shadowy figure, Melissa Cargill, same as the Cargill company.
Wow.
That was his girlfriend who actually taught him how to make LSD, supposedly. And she has totally invisible, right? I mean, you can't find almost nothing about her. And again, I've seen a lot of this stuff, even these bios scrubbed, so they bifurcate them, so you've got your happy hippie background. Okay, let's do another quote on this. So this is another quote, and I another clip. This is either Owsley or Jerry. I'll tell when I listen to it. So this is Jerry Garcia.
Okay. I can't hear that. If you're playing something, it's not coming through.
Sorry, my bad. I forgot to turn the speakers on. Let's do it again. Here we go. So this is Jerry talking about, chaos theory and then what happens to sensory perception with psychedelics. But listen to this. So here we go.
This is Cargill right there.
No. Melissa Cargill was Owsley's roommate.
Right.
But
I'm just showing a picture of her. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah. If you could find more information on her, man, because she's kind of
trying to. It's been scrubbed.
Yeah. So here's Jerry talking about virtual reality and magic with a K.
Along there, we're starting to bump into chaos now, as the lines between hearing and touch are blurred. Now you're starting to get into this kind of chaos. I remember in some kind of part of that automatic writing kind of psychic literature stuff about Lemuria and ancient Egypt that you bump into occasionally. There was something in there about the fall of the early magically oriented societies pre-Atlantean, was that they had control over form, and that there was just too great a variety of forms, that people were becoming anything they wanted to, any animal, anything like that, and that part of the process of part of the reaction to it was the desire to restrict the forms to the forms that we are familiar with now. This stuff is all stuff that bubbles out of the subconscious of people. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know. It doesn't have any relation to real historicity, but it's part of the mythos, And there's a metaphor in there somewhere about that thing of losing some sense of what the bounds of reality are. What your experience is. And I think it's the basic threat of drugs, psychedelics specifically, is somewhere tied into that. And that this virtual reality stuff is the technological equivalent, really, of psychedelics.
So this is very important. Again, this is from the early 90s. There's a background noise there. They're doing like he's backstage. He's talking about virtual reality and psychedelics. Now, what virtual reality you had back 1990? Nothing. But listen to this. Very important. So yeah, continue.
And I can see that I think that part of it is going to be the thing of being able to make this look like something else, just to avoid that kind of interference. Did you read Barlow's thing about, he's just been handing it out. Do you know John?
Yes, I saw last night, in fact.
Yeah, did you read his thing about these people who are getting busted, the hackers that are getting busted for?
Yeah, I'm involved with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is what they decided to call it,
That's right. Oh, you know all about it. Well, that's...
Yeah, well...
that's not even... I mean, here we're not...
So anyways, so that's... so in that case, he's talking about virtual reality, and he goes on and on to really push it, which I'll tie into the whole 6G, a little bit towards the end here. But basically, I mean, he's talking about, so you're shifting. He brings up that thing, about Atlantis, but also they had basically blurring the lines between physical reality and actual reality, and then saying virtual reality is like LSD and it's going to become the new LSD, and this is why the man wants to bust you. The man wants to bust virtual reality. You know what I mean? That's, he's putting that thing, oh, the man wants to stop people from, from experiencing virtual reality because that's a freedom and the man hates freedom, right? So that's, anyways, but he definitely equates virtual reality, which is really, what the world we're being almost shunted into, right? The World Economic Forum is straight up there. So, yeah, that's there you go. We can go to the next slide if you'd like.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
All right, so there's the Wilson Fellows.
Yeah.
So they participated in SRS LSD experiments? I didn't know that.
In 1959, right? So that's where Ken Kesey, and that's where he wrote One with the Cuckoo's Nest, but also Ken Babbs, who, he was the guy running the complex light and sound machines for these crazy acid tests, which seemed really unpleasant. You know what I mean? Like if I'm on acid, you don't want to be around a bunch of these freaks, but they, stuff could actually permanently psychotically damage people. But anyways, and then Robert Hunter, the lyricist of the Grateful Dead, was right there too. And that's where he got inspired to become a writer, was being part of the same LSD experiments. Owsley, Garcia, and many others, including, I believe, Kesey and Ken Babbs also were ex-military. And just to, and there's a whole bunch of other connections, but we see the Palo Alto, we see around the same date, and we see all these major players coming together. And as Stanford Research Institute research agenda developed, so these actual things, which we'll hear quotes of how they're experimenting with this on their fans, right? They're using their fans, okay, anyways, and this is a quote about Operation Deadhead, quote, and sorry, I don't have the source there, but it's just a source related to that. I was contacted by someone who was on a petition drive to get someone out of jail who was a victim of Operation Deadhead and still in jail over 20 years later, like a life sentence. I wasn't aware of the Deadhead operation, which is still ongoing. I'm not sympathetic to drug dealers and would normally get involved in this. It's a typo. I would not normally get involved in this type of effort, but there's one aspect of this that I'm interested in from a legal standpoint. What was the Dead's involvement? It was long rumored that Garcia was an informant. Okay. And so there were several suits, and you have people literally spending their lives in jail. Right. So this is, and I would say that even the legal aspect of getting people busted for drugs compared to the social engineering aspect and the occultic aspects and potentially other things, this is, I guess, it's a tip of an iceberg, but I think it gives some evidentiary platform for the little more far out things. So.
Right. I agree. Define Operation Deadhead? I can't find anything about it online.
I think it was actually Operation Dead End and Operation Dead. It was basically, it was a major FBI trafficking thing, and I think it was connected. It was sort of semi-classified, but it was primarily related to, the Dead were the largest. They were the international psychedelic distribution network, right? Right. And when they stopped playing, there's a massive drop off in psychedelics, and then it goes right up. But many other drugs, it was a huge network of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people involved in that. So there's a couple different names for it. Now in this case, I won't, I would need to do more research. I remember seeing stuff on this before online. When I looked this time, I could find next to nothing. So there's a lot that is being actually scrubbed, from your search engines. I said, even the bios, that's why, but we can move on from there.
Let's go to the next one.
Okay, well, let's go back and then let's just listen to, or you can leave it there, the neural network. So let's listen to some more quotes from the Dead. This is what I think is very interesting. So we'll get deeper, and these are all interviews, so listen to this. This is pretty fascinating. This is about the Merry Pranksters. This is with Owsley talking about, and Ken Kesey may be on the interview too, but talking about what the Merry Pranksters were doing. So here we go.
They did specific things. They did specific things. They made specific sounds. They did specific stuff. They would loop tape machines together and do delays and get reverberation, with the sound reinforcing itself. And there's a certain persistence, like when you're really high, you move your hand, you get a smear. Well, there's also other kinds of persistence, and they reinforced all these things. How they came upon them, it seemed as though they had rediscovered something from ancient ways and ancient times. A lot of the music that's used in shamanic rituals does the same thing, which we discovered later, but this was totally came up in isolation. None of these people in the Gizi scene had any roots in the shamanistic rituals at all. That was the other group of people that I'd run into every so often that were more into those things. You know, the Millbrook guys and the rest of those guys, and the, you know, Janiger, all those guys, they were more into that. Whether they actually got into the rituals or not, because I just had some contacts with them, you know, take a few trips with them and that sort of thing, but didn't follow that line, didn't go down, never went to an Indian peyote meeting, although I've always had a desire to do so, and I never went to a curandero in Mexico with the mushroom.
Well, I'll stop it there. So he says very specific tape loops, delays, and rituals. And so, but very specific. I mean, they were doing, you know, this is scientific research. This is not random, right? This is not, they're inducing all these types of states, very complex mechanisms, right? So but he also said they're conducting rituals. They're using occult type of rituals along with scientifically devised, types of, modification of consciousness. So there's all kinds of, but he says that there, of course, we have to go a little bit deeper to find out some of those specifics. But I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
No, it's just interesting. I mean, you just see how knowledgeable they are. That's what I'm impressed by. Yeah, but go ahead, continue.
Well, not even knowledgeable, but they were conducting these experiments. They were, Owsley was, devising the sound system. I mean, he wasn't, but anyways, let's just continue a little bit more with that same quote.
Those things, so I've never actually seen it, but from the best that I can figure out, all those rituals contained a lot of the elements which the pranksters discovered, or rediscovered, or invented, or something.
Probably not that much of a surprise, though. I mean, I certainly have the belief that a lot of that stuff is in here. It's
well, it must
genetic.
It must
a lot of, the reason a lot of this stuff is we get that recognition from it is that.
So anyway, so basically so we have an admission that the pranksters were conducting specific occult rituals, right? Using the template of occult rituals, as well as doing psychobiological experimentation with very specific ratios of light and sound, delays, all kinds of specific tonal frequencies. It wasn't just, random dudes playing around with dials and knobs, right? So I've got a Word document. I guess it didn't show up in the PowerPoint, and I have some stuff about the SRI. And I can just share that, read from that. Do you want to chime in? Anything?
No, please continue. Go ahead.
Okay. So, share screen, select window or screen, and let's see. Where's Microsoft Word? Okay. Do entire screen. Let's see what happens here. Allow, and I'll just do this full screen. Can you see the document?
Yep, sure can.
Okay, so these are just cut and paste stuff, but this is pretty interesting. So if you want to read some of this, go ahead, because I've been talking a lot. So
let's see what I can find here. The remote viewing team at SRI was in fact engaged in projecting words and images directly to the cranium. It is not a humanitarian pastime. The project was military, and test subjects were often subjected to a lifetime of electromagnetic torture applied with the same thorough disregard for human rights as the radiation tests conducted at the height of the Cold War. To be sure, the treatment subjects have received at the hands of their own government. EM mind control machines were championed at SRI by Dr. Carl Prebram, director of the Neuropsychology Research Laboratory.
Go ahead.
I certainly could educate a child by putting in an electrode in the lateral hypothalamus and then selecting the situations at which I stimulated. In this, I can grossly change his behavior. Psychology Today touted Prebram as the Magellan of brain science. Wow.
Magellan or Mengele, you know?
Yeah, really. He obtained his BS and MD degrees at the University of Chicago, and at SRI studied how the brain processes and stores sensory imagery. He is credited with the discovering that mental imaging bears a close resemblance to hologram projection, the basis for transmitting images to the brains. The SRI SAIC Psi experiments were supervised at Langley by John McMahon, second in command under William Casey, succeeding Bobby Ray Inman, the SAIC director. McMahon has, according to Philip Agee, the CIA whistleblowing exile, an affinity for technological exotics for CIA covert actions. He is a former director of the Technical Services Division, deputy director for operations, and in 1982, McMahon was appointed deputy director of Central Intelligence. He left the agency 6 years later to take the position of president of the Lockheed Missiles and Space Systems Group. In 1994, he moved on to Draper Laboratories. He is the director of the Defense Enterprise Fund and an advisor to congressional committees. Many of the SRI empaths were mustered from L. Ron Hubbard's Church of Scientology. Harold Putoff, the Institute's senior researcher, is a leading Scientologist. 2 remote viewers from SRI have also held the rank in the church. Ingo Swann, Class 7 operating Phaeton, and the late Pat Price. Putoff and Targ's lab assistant was a Scientologist married to a minister of the church. When Swann joined SRI, he stated openly that 14 clears participated in the experiments, more than I would suspect. At the time, he denied CIA involvement, but now acknowledges it was rather common knowledge all along who the sponsor was, although in documents, the identity of the agency was concealed behind the sobriquet of an East Coast scientist. The agency's interest was quite extensive. A number of agents of the CIA came themselves ultimately to SRI as subjects in remote viewing experiments, as did some members of Congress. Wow. Oh, yeah. No. It goes on to Jolyon West. Keep going. Yeah. Bring it back.
Okay. I wanted to play some quotes. That was that's my big
Jolyon West. That's
that's my big. The money.
That's your aha.
Well, it's all kind of aha. But it keeps really interesting. And guess where Mr. Owsley, who was again making the LSD for the Merry Pranksters, making LSD for the Grateful Dead, designing the sound system. Guess where he also worked? JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Get out.
Yes.
Owsley did?
Yeah. He worked at JPL. Wow. And then, and, we all know the other people there. So let's, we'll just continue on. This is a little bit more of from some stuff about those who were there at the time and talking about this, but also sort of revealing a lot in their own words. So here we go. We'll finish this about the prankster ritual.
Some of it emanates from our own neurology and DNA.
You read this one, haven't you?
No, I haven't.
It's really, know that book?
It's really interesting.
Intoxication.
It's called Intoxication.
Ronald Siegel. He's
starting to research on the craving for altered states.
Oh, that's the 4th drive theory?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that.
Yeah.
Well, it seems obvious. In fact, examination is very you recover from all this. I guess if you're tough, and I guess most of us were. Occasionally, some people weren't. It's unfortunate, but because of the way in which it was undertaken in those days, and the fact that we used to take huge amounts of acid, we used to take 250, 300 mics or more. Kesey preferred 400 or more, and Albert Hoffman told me that was a substantial overdose. I said, yes. In retrospect, we realized it was. But
what do you consider an optimum dose?
Oh, I don't know. Behavior of thought and mentation has electronic nature.
So, okay, it's not just about doses. And a lot of times with a lot of these like drug cowboy heroes, you find they were not really taking as much as it says they took, right? Like a number, I think it was like it was a Phil Lash and even Bob Weir. Like they didn't really, they stopped taking LSD if they even took it that much, right? And just to we go to Hank Harrison, of course, who was the Grateful Dead's the manager of the Warlocks, right? When they started in Palo Alto with all these just all met up, and all with these unique backgrounds right there. And there was actually an earlier sort of the first psychedelic convent or rock scene actually took place in the desert of Las Vegas, New Virginia, Nevada. But that was more like a Wild West. I won't just get into that. That's kind of interesting. That was like the rollout before the 60, it was about 63, even before the Merry Pranksters. But it was anyways, that's there's one of the bands would have residencies there. But they were shooting guns. They were cowboy dressed like cowboys. You've got the other. Okay, anyways, that get back to that. So this is again talking about the electro-neurochemical model of the mind, and this is what they're manipulating. So you have this idea. We've heard about the rituals, right? Even from Jerry, they're talking about specific occult aspects being involved, very specific. Now this is the thing of thought as electricity. Check this out, and okay.
Behavior of thought and mentation has electronic nature to it. There's a flow of electrons. And in fact, one of the things, very interesting thing, this is very interesting too, as a little side, about how psychedelics affect you and how you interact with not only consciousness, but we found that some of the psychedelics seem to affect our ability to interact with inanimate equipment.
Really?
Specifically, when someone at a show or when in a room where someone was playing music was to take some DMT, which is a rather powerful psychedelic, the music would immediately become louder and more strident. And
really, the other people would notice that.
Absolutely, everybody. Oh, everybody. It just does it does a thing, and it has a certain tonality to it, a certain quality to it, which is very distinctive. So we decided none of us could. Generally, we'd all do it, right? We thought, oh, well, that's just one of those things. But then I got on back to that thing that I learned from Melissa, is that don't assume.
That's Melissa Cargill, right? The mysterious Melissa Cargill. So what they're talking about is telekinesis, right? And, go through. So then they're, of course, doing experiments with telekinesis at SRI, but he's giving examples. And again, but Melissa Cargill, this very mysterious lady. So he's talking about Melissa Cargill, but notice that thoughts are electricity. The brain is a computer, right? Virtual reality. Okay, let's listen. Here we go.
That this is an illusion caused by the substance. Believe it's real. So I said, hey, I believe this is real. Well, one thing we noticed was that the tubes would get red hot and burn out half the time, and it would tear the voice clothes out of the speakers. And yet we couldn't make it do that ordinarily. So, you see, it was very funny because the lady that I was with in those days was quite direct. Her name was Melissa. And
quite direct?
Very direct about everything, right? So whenever we would get high, this was long before I met the dead, right? But whenever we get high, and things just start getting really weird, she would insist on dealing with them as though they were real, not a hallucination, not something that the drug was doing, but this is reality, and forced me to deal with it. So I never got into that space that a lot of people get into, where they say, oh, it's the drug that's doing this. This is a hallucination. This is a non-real effect which is being produced by a chemical which is in my brain. I had to deal with it as though this was the absolute concrete everyday reality. Now, deal with it, right? And that was interesting because that's different. It's different that way. See, you do a whole different. You have a whole different set, right? It's like the difference between sitting in a.
Okay, it goes on and on, but he's saying that, take the trips as real. And I've got. There's many other things I have, even in terms of developing a collective group mind, right? But telekinesis, telepathy, all these things were ongoing. Do you want to let's go back to this document here and let's but please chime in, William.
I'm just listening along, man. It's really fascinating. I didn't know Oswald Stanley had all of these audio tapes. I'm just totally fascinated by this whole aspect that you've taken in this 6th episode.
Maybe. Yeah. So here we go, and I'll let you read this. This is sort of this is a big moment. I expect donations. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
You should.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, I should.
You
Actually.
should ask for donations somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I'm gonna ask for donations before I. Hansutter@hotmail.com. That's my
There you
PayPal.
go.
There you go. So then I'll actually have a website. Okay. Here we go. So go ahead, William, and let me. Let's do this in entire screen. And let's see what you have there. You're not getting it. Let's see. Where's my word? Word. Here we go. Okay.
Go back. Add it back. Okay. There we go.
Yep. I'll just do full screen.
Do you want me to keep reading this next one?
Yep. Go ahead. If you want to just go over the beginning, just read that first.
Okay, I missed that first thing.
Yeah.
The official history of SRI remote viewing program suggests that the initial research got underway in 1972 due to a proposal by Hal Puthoff. Allegedly, the remote viewing program was an attempt to train psychic spies who could view locations at any distance via psychic abilities. Puthoff suggests that this idea came about due to a meeting with psychic Ingo Swann, who had read some proposal of Puthoff about quantum processes in biology. This, like so much involving SRI, is a complete fabrication. In fact, Puthoff and Swann were both high-level members of the Church of Scientology, and the remote viewing techniques were based on Scientology procedures. Puthoff will be of particular interest since immediately prior to coming to Stanford, Puthoff says he was a naval intelligence officer and then a civilian employee of the National Security Agency. The initial research for remote viewing at SRI was sponsored by the CIA via MKULTRA.
Okay, and then you go ahead. Here's the paragraph.
And here it is. The British correspondent learned that on the tour that medical oversight for the Psi experiments was provided by Dr. Lewis Jolly and West.
And by the way, this is BBC documentary, so that's what that's referring to. So,
okay, so what do you know the name of the BBC documentary?
I have it in my notes. I don't have it in this one document, but yeah.
One of the most notorious CIA mind control specialists in the country. Apart from monitoring the health of the subjects, according to SRI spokesman, Dr. West conducted his own experimental studies on the phenomenology of dissociative states or multiple personalities. That's the Institute. Dr. Colin Ross, a specialist in dissociative disorders, offers that Dr. West's work for the CIA centered on the biology or personality of dissociative states. Many victims of the CIA-anchored experimentation have been left with multiple personalities induced at a young age, and it is certain that the CIA can trigger induced multiple personalities electronically from a remote source to commit any act on cue in the ultimate Manchurian candidate. Under West's tutelage at UCLA, parapsychology experiments were of another sort were conducted by Kirlian aura researcher Thelma Moss, a writer for television and a human guinea pig herself in LSD experiments conducted in 1957. 3 years later, as a UCLA psychology student, she designed protocols for her own LSD experiments under the supervision of Dr. Oscar Yaniger. The CIA, of course, could not be far away. Dr. Yaniger's supplier of the drug was the legendary Captain Al Hubbard, the Johnny Appleseed of LSD. Nothing of substance has been written about Al Hubbard, Yaniger once said, and probably nothing ever should. Hubbard, a convicted rum runner, and had a knack for electronic communications. He was recruited by the OSS by agents of Allen Dulles and surely reported to the CIA thereafter. Hubbard, an arch-conservative, joined SRI at the urging of Willis Harman, director of the Institute's Educational Policy Research Center, ostensibly as a security guard. Harman, an LSD experimenter himself, admits, Al never did anything resembling security work. Hubbard was employed on the Alternative Futures Project, a corporate strategy program. Al had a grandiose idea, one coworker recalls, that if he could give the psychedelic experiments to major executives of the Fortune 500 companies, he could change the whole of society. Hubbard was a major supplier to universities sponsoring experimentation and flooded the youth subculture he despised with LSD in the 1960s. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like they were doing LSD tests and everything before the 60s.
They're
done in the 50s.
They're done in the 50s, and then so even and it does seem like so you could look at that. I mean, just as I'll stop share. Okay, like as one of those like almost a training thing. So even a lot of these researchers or people that were doing it had to go through some exposure to it, right? and so like the Red Dog Saloon, and they're actually, that's where the first sort of LSD rock environment was there. Could you play one of the bands? So like Big Brother and the Holding Company started in '63, right? Before there was Haight Ashbury. But like one of the bands there was the Charlatans. They were considered like one of the first psychedelic bands. So they had these communal group trips. But again, not hippie, but like Wild West. Everyone had guns and stuff, and it was, but if you play the, if you look up online, just play Codine by the Charlatans. So this is one of the bands that was at this Red Dog Saloon place. But the people doing that were also part of these 1957 to 1959 LSD rollouts, even going back as early as 1953. But these people became then running operations, right? They went through a training program. Ken Kesey tests it, and suddenly he's, put all his money into, fund the Merry Pranksters just out of his own largesse because he wants to change the world. So the Charlatans, so they basically came into being, as they had a residency at this Red Dog Saloon, and so during the residency, you basically played music. Everyone took LSD and party, but that's where they were known as the, one of the original psychedelic groups. But you can see they're not really, the hippie movement hadn't really been developed, so they're using more of this Wild West thing a bit. But go ahead and play the Charlatans.
Okay, let me take this off. The Charlatans. Let's go here. All right.
Okay, you can stop it there, but that's cool. Okay. You could stop it, William.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
actually,
like a total Dead knockoff.
well, that's way before the Dead existed, right? So that's the Dead, before before there was a Grateful Dead. So,
Right.
but and what's interesting too, though, if you look at the early set lists of the Warlocks, right? They're playing like Louie Louie, Wooly Bully, 3-chord frat rock songs. I mean, they were not doing it. You know what I mean? Not much there, but yet they were part of these experimentation. But again, the first iteration or rollout of this was this Red Dog Saloon thing, and I've got a bunch more stuff on that, which I'll talk about later. But that they actually came. They had the Flying Dog, or was it Flying Dog, or Flying Dog Review. They came. There was a Trips Festival. They set up a shop in Haight Ashbury. And now we also got Jolly West linked in here, right? And we already did the Manson thing, but now we're looking at direct correlation of the founders of this whole movement, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Like sort of the leaders, you know, of course, again, the cover story is, you know, Ken Kesey just spent the money he made from writing, you know, Wonderful Lure of the Cuckoo's Nest, you know, paying for these very complicated acid tests with tens of thousands of dollars of, you know, complicated equipment, right? You're not going to the Guitar Center and buying, you know, these are like, you know, research level. I've got some of these old like vacuum tube, you know, they were used for research, like neuroscience research stuff, you know, laboratory grade. A lot of these delays and types of machines they were using, they weren't, you know, off the rack, you know, at your, you know what I mean? These were, you know, white noise generators and but they were using very complex delay sequences, you know, and again, this stuff, there wasn't, you know, at the time, people weren't really, you know, where everyone thinks now you got your guitar pedal board. It wasn't like that back then. I mean, you know, Hendrix had almost all his guitar pedals custom made for him, right? So this whole thing developed. It wasn't like this stuff wasn't available. You had like wah pedal, some of them, but even maybe a fuzz face, but you know, this stuff was not available, right? I mean, and this was scientific grade. You know what I mean? So Ken Kesey just paid for this bus, drove all these, you know, hippies or just out of his royalties. And then, you know, you can read like there's some articles, was Ken Kesey making the best use of his money? So we're talking like, did he even have enough money to fund this whole like commune? You know, maybe he did, you know, but it's just interesting. But they all tie back, even Robert Hunter, right? And then, you know, especially Owsley, you know, being so important to this thing. So let me just I'll just play a few more quotes here as we wind down. But, you know, as you go deeper and deeper into the parapsychology research that was being done and seeing how this is correlating, even the dead, you know, he was talking about how they could, with their mind power on certain hallucinogens, they were blowing out the speaker tubes of their amplifiers.
Right.
Yeah. So here we go. So here's Owsley.
I have about 10 more minutes.
Okay. Yep. So let me think. What is the best? I'll just do a couple of these. Control of DNA through electricity. That's kind of interesting, right? So let's play this here. Okay.
That scared me.
How so?
Oh, it just seemed frightening. They seem to have, all of that seemed to have a connection to a very scary and possibly dangerous aspect of reality to me.
Somebody told me that you pushed a chair around that building.
Yeah, I was
It made a lot of noise.
So this is Owsley talking about being around, you know, the dead or the quasi-warlocks, right, during the time of the acid test, right? And describing all these weird parapsychological phenomena, but he said it was frightening, you know, to be around them. So that's the context of this. Let me start it over. So
that scared me.
How so?
Oh, it just seemed frightening. They seem to have, all of that seemed to have a connection to a very scary and possibly dangerous aspect of reality to me.
Somebody told me that you pushed a chair around that building.
Yeah, I was pushing
It made
a chair.
a lot of noise.
Made some noise. Everything was making noise. It was a very noisy place. Probably it seemed like it, yeah.
I'd like to hear your side of that story.
I don't know. I remember pushing the chair around, and I remember all kinds of different things. I remember all kinds of noises and sounds and things. The pranksters would make these noises, and the noises would seem to get inside your nervous system, and as if there was some type of a plug or something in your head. It would get.
listen to that. The noises would seem to get inside your nervous system as if there was some type of plug in your head.
Wow.
Okay. And again, this guy is, you know, scientific background, JPL, Air Force. So he's using, okay. Anyways, so just think about that. Okay. We'll continue.
Get in there and scrape away.
Hold on.
Something in your head. It would get in there and scrape away. Some type of a plug or something in your head. It would get in there and scrape away.
I can't hear that.
Some kind of.
Oh, you couldn't hear that? Okay. Let me just go back. Okay. All right.
Let me try again.
Something in your head. It would get in there and scrape away.
Check one, two.
Some kind of a.
Are you hearing me?
So it would make the
Yeah, I hear it now.
available to be plugged into something. The psychic cable.
For the insulation.
To scrape away some.
I'm gonna play this again.
It's kind of coming in and out. Let's see.
Okay. Oh, maybe it's. I don't know. Okay. Okay.
It might be my side. Like my AirPods died. I don't know what happened to them.
Okay. Well, this is a very important
Okay, that's good.
quote. Yeah. So this is a very important quote, especially when you look at the SRI.
You're coming in and out. I don't know if it's my side or yours.
Oh, I'm coming in and out.
Check 1 2. Seems to be.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I've got a consistent level I'm showing.
Yeah, no,
so-
I don't hear anything.
You don't hear me now? Hello, test 1 2. Hello. Test 1 2. Can you hear me? Can you hear me talking? Can you hear me? Hello? You can't hear me? Hello, test 1 2 test. So I'm showing signal.
Cap. So it would make the connection available to be plugged into something. The psychic cable.
For the insulation.
William, can you hear me now or no? Do you have my audio? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
So he hears you. I don't hear you.
Okay, so they hear me. So let me go ahead and play
It's on
this.
my side.
So this is very important. This is central.
Audio.
So this is specifically talking about creating psychic cables.
Check 1 2.
Okay, so the audience can hear me, so I'll keep going. So this is talking
Somebody
about.
hears me. Laura hears me. I don't know what's going on.
I think she hears me. So I'm going. I can see that.
Check 1 2.
Yeah, I can
I
hear
think it's
you.
on your side. I think it's on yours.
Is it? Hear me. I don't. Nothing changed. Are you sure you can't? Are you sure it's on your headphones? Hello.
Well, if you can't describe what you were doing with acid before, can you just?
William, you can't hear me at all. You can't. Nothing.
Yeah, I don't hear it. Let's see. Private chat. I can hear you. Can others hear me? I can't hear you, so I don't know. I mean, I keep bouncing around between these two different things. My whole setup just isn't set up for multimedia. It's just that simple. Like, you got to bounce in between these two speakers and stuff like that. I just don't have that great of a setup.
Can you hear me now? Hello, test 1 2. Can you hear me now?
Check 1 2.
Can you hear me?
Stacy hears both of me, but audio, but we can't hear each other. I don't know. What's going
Okay.
on. Just play it. Just play
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why it's not here, man.
From ancient stuff, right? This is, and without any maps, where this maybe need to be careful about this. It was kind of scary. He kind of laughed at me. Well, it's sort of like the guy that gets on a roller coaster.
I just think that really StreamYard,
They were
it just what it goes on is that it just doesn't bounce out between different inputs very well. That's really what I think it is. So I'm just gonna call it a day.
Standing in the room listening.
Can you hear me? You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
I can't hear you.
Okay.
I mean, we're at an hour 15 minutes.
Okay. Can
Let's just reschedule for later,
okay.
like sometime in August. We'll
Okay.
finish it off. Or
Okay.
Keep it going. People are definitely listening to this show. We're totally interested in MKUltra for the masses.
Hey,
but we're not there. And I'll put a link to your website, handsUltra.com, and then we'll just do MKUltra 7. But yeah, we'll try to figure it out. Like, I don't know, mate. There has to be a better way to do it, where you kind of queue up the audio into one large file instead of bouncing in between. Like, you got to put it into an MP4 file instead of this WAV file, because
I wasn't
think
changing.
it's just the inputs are too confusing to StreamYard. So thanks so much, Hans Uter. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you. If you can hear me. All right.